Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepless Scientist, where curiosity curls up under a blanket, and even the most mysterious ideas find a place to rest. Tonight's journey might sound a little dark at first, but don't worry, it's all wrapped in softness and wonder. We're exploring the quiet, shadowy corners of the mind, the world of nightmares, not to frighten, but to understand, gently. Because even our scariest dreams are trying to tell us something, and sometimes listening softly can help us rest more deeply. But first, I'd love to know, when was your last nightmare? Or maybe, what age were you when you had your first one? Was it a monster under the bed, a test you forgot to study for, falling, flying, running, but getting nowhere? You're not alone. All across the world, in every language, in every bed, people dream. And sometimes, those dreams turn strange, frightening, familiar, or even oddly beautiful. If you find this kind of sleepy science comforting, I'd be ever so grateful if you tap the like button, or maybe subscribe to this cozy corner of the internet. It helps this gentle journey reach others who might need a peaceful pause before bed too. So now, get comfortable. Let your shoulders soften, let your mind feel light, and know that even in our nightmares, there's something deeply human and strangely hopeful, because somewhere between REM cycles and myth, between the fear we flee and the stories we tell ourselves, lies the gentle science of nightmares. Let's begin. What exactly is a nightmare? In sleep science, nightmares are essentially very upsetting dreams that jolt you awake, leaving you anxious or afraid. They're more intense than ordinary bad dreams. A bad dream might be unpleasant or sad, but a true nightmare is the kind of dream that bursts your eyes open in the middle of the night with your heart racing. The feelings from a nightmare can linger even after you realize it was just a dream. If you've ever woken up from being chased by some unknown terror, only to find your hands shaking and your heart pounding, you know the feeling. In contrast, if you had a bad dream about, say, losing your wallet, you might sleep through it and only feel a bit disturbed in the morning. The key difference is, a nightmare wakes you up with a start, whereas a bad dream does not. Nightmares have been called frightening dreams that result in feelings of terror, fear, distress, or anxiety. That captures it well. A nightmare is not just a story in your sleeping mind, but one that scares you enough that your body reacts. You might wake up with a gasp, a sheen of sweat on your skin, even a cry or shout before you fully come to your senses. Take comfort though. No matter how scary a nightmare feels, it cannot harm you in reality. You are safe in your bed. The intense images and emotions are all part of a drama crafted by your mind, one that fades once you're awake. As we explore further, we'll see that these dramas have common threads across people and deep roots in our brains and cultures. But here at the start, remember that virtually everyone experiences nightmares occasionally. You're not alone in that midnight fright. It's actually normal for both children and adults to have a nightmare from time to time. So if you've had bad dreams, rest assured they're a natural, if uncomfortable, part of being human. In this journey, we'll shine a soft lantern light on nightmares from many angles. We'll peek inside the sleeping brain to understand what sparks these vivid night terrors. We'll gently examine the common themes that haunt our dreams, whether it's being chased, falling from the sky, or finding something lurking in the shadows, and why such images visit so many of us in sleep. We'll ponder why nightmares exist at all. Do they have a purpose? Could they be strangely helpful in some way? There are intriguing theories from psychologists and neuroscientists that nightmares might help us practice dealing with threats or process our emotions. We'll see how stress and trauma in waking life can spill into our dreams, and how nightmares can be a window into our anxieties. We'll also talk about children's nightmares, those scary dreams of childhood that send little ones running for parental comfort, and how they differ from adult nightmares. And as we drift further, we'll enter the misty realm of folklore and art, where nightmares were once thought to be actual demons or evil spirits. For centuries, people have tried to capture the nightmare in paintings, stories, even medical texts, to make sense of why our sleeping minds sometimes conjure fear. This won't be a scary journey. Think of it as quietly exploring a dark forest with a trusted guide and a lantern in hand. We'll illuminate each shadowy corner with understanding and curiosity, not horror. By understanding nightmares, we strip them of some of their power. And if these night visions trouble you, fear not. We'll also discuss ways to cope with nightmares. There are gentle techniques, like reshaping the story of a recurring nightmare into a calmer ending, or learning to realize you're dreaming so you can face down the dream's fears. Finally, we'll end our journey on a calming note, reflecting on how even nightmares might have silver linings. So, as you listen in the comfort of your bed, let your mind drift along with my voice. Imagine each topic as a stepping stone across a moonlit pond. Step by step, we'll cross to the other side, gaining insight into nightmares while remaining relaxed and safe. Take a deep breath. Feel the softness of your blankets. And let's begin our midnight exploration together. To understand nightmares, it helps to distinguish them from other nighttime phenomena. We've already touched on how nightmares differ from bad dreams. In sleep research, a bad dream is simply a disturbing dream that doesn't fully wake you up, whereas a nightmare is usually defined as a disturbing dream so intense that it does wake you up, often with a jolt of fear. In other words, all nightmares are bad dreams, but not all bad dreams become nightmares. You might think of it this way. A bad dream is like a rainstorm passing in the night. You might feel its mood but sleep on, whereas a nightmare is a thunderclap right overhead that startles you awake. Researchers often use awakening as the dividing line. Did the dream scare you awake? If yes, it's a nightmare. If you slept through it but recall it was unpleasant, it's a bad dream. Nightmares also tend to carry stronger emotional punch than bad dreams. They commonly provoke fear, but can also involve other intense emotions like horror, helplessness, or grief. Interestingly, not every nightmare is about terror in a traditional sense. Studies have found that while fear is most frequent, some nightmares feature feelings like anger or sadness as the main theme. What makes it a nightmare is that the emotion is overwhelming enough to disrupt sleep. After awakening from a nightmare, it's normal to lie there for a while, your body still calming down. Your heart might be beating fast, you may be breathing hard, and it can take a few moments to reorient yourself and realize, I'm safe in my bed. It was just a dream. That leftover adrenaline and emotion is a hallmark of nightmares. In contrast, waking from a normal dream, or even a mild bad dream, doesn't usually produce such a physical reaction. You might wonder how common nightmares are. Nearly everyone has had at least one nightmare that they remember. For most people, they're infrequent visitors, perhaps cropping up during stressful times. However, a significant number of people do experience nightmares more regularly. Surveys suggest that about 75 to 85% of adults recall having a nightmare at least once in the past year, and roughly 8 to 29% report a nightmare as often as once a month. A smaller percentage, around 2 to 6% of adults, have nightmares every week or even nightly. So if you're someone who suffers frequent bad nights, you're not alone, though it is less common. Dusra. Nightmares are especially common in children. Little kids, with their vivid imaginations and limited understanding of the world's logic, often dream up frightful things at night. Nightmares typically begin by age 3 or so, when children's imagination and memory become advanced enough to generate lengthy dreams. In fact, between ages 3 and 6, nightmares are quite prevalent. If you think about it, this is the age when ordinary things can seem scary to a child. The dark, strangers, monsters under the bed. It's no surprise their dreams reflect those fears. Many children will cry out from a nightmare and need comfort before they settle back to sleep. Fortunately for most kids, nightmares happen less often as they get older. After about age 10, many children's brains mature and their fears become less fantastical, so the dragon or ghost nightmares fade away. Of course, older kids and teens can still have bad dreams, but often the themes shift. We'll talk more about age differences soon. Before we move on, let's briefly clarify something. Nightmares are not night terrors. People often confuse these terms, but night terrors, sleep terrors, are a different sleep phenomenon altogether. A night terror isn't actually a dream at all. It's more like a sudden panicked reaction that happens when a person is partially aroused out of deep, non-REM sleep, the dreamless stage, usually in the first few hours of the night. Night terrors are most common in young children. A child having a night terror might suddenly sit up, scream or shout, look terrified with eyes open, even thrash around, yet they are not truly awake and often won't respond to comfort. It's as if the brain's fear switch flipped on during deep sleep. Unlike nightmares, night terrors typically come with no detailed dream imagery. If you gently wake someone from a night terror, which can be hard to do, they usually don't remember any storyline of being chased or anything, perhaps just a single scary impression or nothing at all. The person often doesn't fully wake up and will fall back to quiet sleep on their own, with no memory in the morning. Night terrors can be dramatic to witness, but for the person experiencing it, it's not a conscious nightmare in the way we define it. In contrast, when you wake from a nightmare, you're immediately alert, vividly aware of what you were just dreaming, and often can recall it in detail. In short, nightmares are bad dreams during REM sleep that you remember, whereas night terrors are fear reactions during deep sleep, with little or no dream memory. Both can be distressing, but they are different creatures of the night. Understanding these differences hopefully makes nightmares a bit less mysterious. Now we know a nightmare is basically a scary dream that wakes you up, as opposed to other nighttime frights like bad dreams you sleep through or non-dream terrors. With that foundation, let's gently turn on a light inside the sleeping mind to see what's happening in the brain when nightmares occur. Imagine for a moment that we could peek into the theatre of the brain as a nightmare plays out on its stage. What would we see? Let's step into that inner world, keeping our lantern of curiosity held high. Every night when we fall asleep, our brain cycles through different stages of sleep, like a slow tidal rhythm. The most vivid dreams, including nightmares, tend to occur during a stage called REM sleep, short for rapid eye movement sleep. In this stage, as the name suggests, our eyes actually flicker rapidly beneath our closed lids, as if watching scenes in our dreams. Our breathing and heart rate become irregular, our brain becomes highly active, yet our body is largely paralyzed. A wise trick of nature to stop us from acting out our dreams. REM sleep is the dream-rich part of the night, and nightmares, being emotionally intense dreams, usually unfold during REM. What's fascinating is how the brain's activity shifts in REM sleep, creating the conditions for vivid dreams. Parts of the brain involved in emotion and memory light up, while parts responsible for logic and reality checking go dim. For instance, the amygdala, a deep brain structure central to processing fear and threat, shows heightened activity during REM dreams. The hippocampus, which helps store memories, and the visual areas at the back of the brain that generate imagery, are also activated during dreams. At the same time, the prefrontal cortex, the region behind your forehead that handles rational thought, judgment, and self-awareness, becomes less active in REM. This combination of an emotional brain with the logical brain on low power explains a lot about dreams. During a nightmare, your brain can conjure up wildly imaginative, scary scenarios. thanks to active emotion and imagery regions, without the inner critic of the prefrontal cortex interrupting to say, "Hang on, this is impossible." That's why in a dream we often accept bizarre events, like running in slow motion, or the sky turning green, or a monster appearing, as if they were reality. We literally lack some logical insight in that moment. Dreams feel real and raw because the brain networks generating feelings and perceptions are in full swing, while the skeptics in our head are snoozing. Scientists call this state a form of virtual reality created by the brain. In REM sleep, it's as if our brain is the playwright, director, and main actor of an immersive theatre production. We sense, act, and feel within the dream world, often not realizing it's a dream until we wake up. In a nightmare, this virtual reality takes a frightening turn. If someone scanned the brain of a person having a nightmare, they might see intense activity in emotion centers, like the amygdala, corresponding to the terror the person is experiencing. In fact, in people who have post-traumatic nightmares following a real trauma, the amygdala may be especially overactive or sensitive, almost as if the brain's fear alarm is stuck on high volume. Meanwhile, the calm reasoning centers that could soothe that fear, for example, parts of the frontal lobe, are relatively quiet in REM. This imbalance can make the fear in nightmares feel very acute and overwhelming. Another aspect of the sleeping brain relevant to nightmares is memory processing. During REM, the brain is believed to be integrating memories and emotions, potentially processing emotional experiences from our day. Some researchers think that dreaming, and REM sleep in general, helps us regulate emotions, almost like therapy sessions we run for ourselves at night. In normal dreaming, even if something scary pops up, the low levels of stress chemicals, like noradrenaline, in REM might help take the edge off those emotions and file them away more gently. It's thought that REM sleep can depotentiate emotional reactions, meaning after dreaming through a problem, we might feel less reactive to it by day. However, in nightmares, it seems this soothing function doesn't quite succeed. The distressing memory or fear is either too intense or replayed in such a vivid way that it ends up waking the sleeper, preventing the full processing. When we wake from a nightmare, the emotional charge is still there, unresolved, leading to that lingering anxiety. Nightmares also tend to occur at particular times of night. Because REM sleep cycles increase in duration as the night goes on, nightmares often strike in the second half of the night or early morning hours. You might notice many nightmares happen in the pre-dawn hours, around 4 or 5 a.m., when REM stages are longest and most intense. At that point, our brain has had hours to dive into dreamland, and the dreams can become very elaborate. A bad dream at 5 a.m. might last 20 minutes in real time and have a detailed plot that our mind concocts. If that plot turns scary, it may crescendo into a nightmare that awakens us just before morning. Since these nightmares happen so close to waking, they're often easier to remember than dreams from earlier in the night. You might wake at 5:30 a.m. from a nightmare in stark detail, whereas a dream at midnight might not be recalled at all. The timing also distinguishes nightmares from night terrors, which, as mentioned, typically occur in the first third of the night during deep sleep. Physiologically, a person in the throes of a nightmare might show signs of stress. Heart rate and breathing can speed up, maybe irregularly. There might be subtle movements or vocal sounds. Some people mumble, cry, or even scream briefly in their sleep as the nightmare peaks. Usually, our body remains paralyzed in REM aside from these twitches or sounds, thankfully, because otherwise we might act out the dream and hurt ourselves. But occasionally a person might move more than usual if the paralysis isn't complete, a condition called REM behavior disorder, which is separate from typical nightmares. For most of us, even in a vivid nightmare, the body stays mostly still. Perhaps your fingers curl or your face winces, but you aren't actually running or fighting, despite how real it feels in the dream. One more interesting point about the brain: when we wake up from a nightmare, we typically become fully alert quickly, often more so than from a normal dream. If you've ever noticed, you can snap awake from a nightmare, heart pounding, and you're immediately in your bedroom, eyes wide, adrenaline pumping. Compare that to waking from a peaceful dream or no dream. You might feel groggy or disoriented. The surge of fear in nightmares probably triggers a fight or flight response that carries over into waking, making you highly alert. It's an evolutionary hangover. Your body acts as if a threat were real. The upside, if we can call it that, is you awaken fast and can recall the dream clearly. The downside is it's not a pleasant way to wake, and it may take a while to relax again. In summary, the science of the sleeping brain shows us that a nightmare is born from a perfect storm of neural activity, emotion centers roaring, visual imagery vivid, logic filters dimmed, and stress chemistry sometimes high. It's a bit like a thunderstorm in the mind, where normally soothing REM processes can become turbulent. But remember, it is your brain's creation, which means, in a sense, it's under your roof and ultimately under your control more than an external threat would be. Just as the brain conjures nightmares, it can also learn to cope with or even transform them, as we'll discuss later. For now, keep holding that lantern. We've peeked at what nightmares are and how the brain cooks them up. Next, let's quietly walk through the common landscapes of nightmares, the recurring themes and symbols that haunt so many people's dreamscapes. You might even recognize a few from your own nights. When you think of the word nightmare, certain classic scary scenarios might spring to mind. Perhaps being chased by a menacing figure, or falling from a great height, or suddenly realizing you're completely unprepared for an exam or a big presentation. It turns out that nightmares around the world share many of these common themes. Despite our individual lives being so different, the human brain seems to fear and imagine a lot of the same things when asleep. It's almost as if our minds wander into a collective dark forest at night and stumble upon the same lurking shapes. What do people see in their nightmares? Researchers have actually studied thousands of dream reports to answer this question. One large study had participants keep dream diaries for weeks, recording nearly 10,000 dreams, then analyzed the ones classified as nightmares. The results are fascinating. The most frequent nightmare theme was physical aggression, being attacked or chased by someone or something. Nearly half of all nightmares in that study involved some kind of threat of physical harm. It makes sense. Being chased by a stranger, a monster, or a wild animal in a dream is a primal fear many of us have experienced. You run and run, heart pounding, but your pursuer, maybe an attacker or a frightening creature, is relentless and often strangely fast. This is the quintessential nightmare many know too well. Another common nightmare theme is interpersonal conflict, intense arguments, humiliations, or betrayal by someone. These nightmares don't always have a boogeyman. Sometimes they revolve around emotional pain inflicted by others. For example, dreaming that a loved one cruelly leaves you, or being publicly shamed by a friend or authority figure. These scenarios tap into our deep social fears. The study found that about 1 in 5 nightmares contain this sort of upsetting social situation without physical violence. Imagine a dream where you're at work or school and suddenly everyone is laughing at you or accusing you of something. It may sound less horror movie than monsters, but it can be terrifying in its own way. A significant share of nightmares, around 16% in that study, center on failure or helplessness. These include the classic ones like being unprepared for an exam or important task, or losing the ability to move or speak when it matters. Perhaps you dream you have to give a speech, and when you open your mouth, no sound comes out, or you arrive at an exam to find it's written in an alien language. These nightmares tap into feelings of inadequacy or loss of control. They leave you with that dreadful sense of, I can't do anything to save myself in this situation. Then there are the nightmares of falling or accidents, often tied to a fear of imminent danger. Many people know the jolt of a falling nightmare. You plummet off a cliff or a high building, and just before you hit the ground, you wake up with a start, often with a physical jerk. Accidents like car crashes, airplane troubles, or drowning also feature in nightmares, roughly 8 to 9% of nightmare reports. These scenarios reflect our fears of catastrophic mishaps and sudden loss of control. Nightmares also frequently involve the presence of an evil or supernatural force. Around 11% of nightmares had an evil presence theme. For example, a ghost, monster, or unseen evil entity lurking nearby. Some people dream of being in a haunted house, feeling a ghostly presence approaching. Others might see a terrifying monster or even feel possessed by a malevolent force in the dream. This theme taps into age-old fears of the dark and the unknown. Essentially, fearing something is here with me and it means harm. Even without a clear image, the sense of a dark presence can be deeply frightening in a nightmare. Health and death-related themes are common too. People often have nightmares where either they or a loved one is gravely ill, injured, or dying. One classic nightmare in this category is dreaming your teeth are falling out or crumbling. A surprisingly common symbolic nightmare that can leave you feeling disturbed, usually linked by psychologists to anxieties about appearance or control. Or you might dream of the death of a family member, which can be emotionally devastating even though it's not real. These nightmares reflect our fears of loss and mortality. Other notable nightmare subjects include infestations or attacks by insects and vermin. Imagine swarms of spiders, snakes, or maggots, unpleasant to say the least, and large-scale disasters like fires, floods, tornadoes, or war. Even bizarre environmental changes show up. For instance, a person might dream that the very room they're in becomes uncanny or changes shape, walls melting, furniture coming alive, which, though unrealistic, can evoke terror in the dream. In the study we've been referencing, about 5 to 6% of nightmares were about huge disasters or surreal environmental horrors. Let's summarize some of these common nightmare themes in a gentle way, not to scare you, but to show how our fears often rhyme with each other's. Being chased or attacked, running from danger, whether human or monster, and feeling imminent threat. This taps into primal fight or flight instincts, threat to survival or safety, situations where one's life is at risk, falling, drowning, car accidents, fires, helplessness or failure, trying desperately to do something and failing, being paralyzed, losing voice, arriving unprepared. Interpersonal trauma, intense conflict, betrayal or embarrassment, fights with loved ones, public humiliation, supernatural evil or presence, ghosts, demons, monsters, or an intangible evil watching or chasing, loss or death, serious illness, injury or death concerning oneself or loved ones, including symbolically via things like teeth falling out. Creepy crawlies, attacks or infestation by insects, snakes, or other creatures that invoke disgust or fear. Disasters and apocalypses, natural disasters, storms, earthquakes, or man-made war, apocalypse scenarios, often with a sense of no escape. Surreal horror, reality itself warping, impossible or bizarre occurrences that nonetheless feel menacing, like a familiar place turning hostile or abnormal. If some of these sound familiar, you've got plenty of company. It's remarkable that roughly half of nightmares contain more than one theme. For example, being chased by a monster, attack plus supernatural, in the middle of an earthquake, disaster, or failing to save a loved one who's in danger, helplessness plus loved one's harm. The dream world often mixes fears together in creative ways. Why do so many of us dream about these particular scenarios? One idea is that these themes represent common human fears and challenges, things that have threatened our survival or well-being across time. Being attacked or chased is an obvious one. Our ancestors had to escape predators or enemies, so perhaps our brains are wired to simulate that danger during sleep. Fear of falling might echo the real risk of heights. Fear of social rejection or humiliation reflects how much we humans depend on each other. Being cast out of the group is a deep worry. Nightmares about death and illness represent the very natural fear of losing life or loved ones. Another angle is that our brains don't exactly choose the scariest topic deliberately. Rather, whatever we're concerned about or experiencing in life can colour our dreams. For instance, someone going through a lot of stress at work might not dream of work itself, but might get a nightmare of being overwhelmed by some uncontrollable force, like a tidal wave, a metaphor for their stress. Our minds often use symbolism. That's why not every nightmare is a literal replay of a real fear. Sometimes it translates abstract feelings into concrete horror images. Stress about an upcoming exam could become a nightmare of being naked on stage. Different setting. Same feeling of exposure and anxiety. It's interesting to note that not all nightmares fit a useful survival theme. Some are downright weird. People have reported nightmares of absurd things. A bedroom dresser doubling in size and becoming menacing, or abstract nightmares that are hard to describe in words. These remind us that dream content can be random or symbolic, not always a straightforward rehearsal of real threats. We'll revisit this when we discuss why we have nightmares. But even in those odd nightmares, the common thread is the emotion of fear, dread, or panic. The story can be anything. The feeling is what makes it a nightmare. As we stroll through these nightmare landscapes, keep in mind, they are reflections of the mind, not physical realities. If you dream of being chased through a forest, your legs aren't actually running, and no real monster is there. It's a movie playing in your head. Reminding ourselves of this can be comforting. We might wake up and think, wow, that felt so real. But then we can say, it was just my brain's imagery. Interestingly, some therapists suggest that recognizing common themes can help people feel less troubled by nightmares. Basically realizing, many people have dreamed of being chased. It's not just me, and it doesn't mean I'm actually in danger. It normalizes the experience a bit. Before moving on, here's a gentle thought. Many nightmares, as frightening as they are, end the moment we awaken. And often, once fully awake, we experience a wave of relief. Have you ever had that feeling? The nightmare's tension breaks, and you're so relieved to realize, I'm okay. It was a dream. Sometimes that relief can even bring a new appreciation for reality. Your mundane bedroom might suddenly feel like the coziest, safest place after what you just endured in your sleep. In a way, nightmares may paint the darkness, so that when we turn on the light, life seems that much brighter. We've talked about what nightmares are made of and the forms they take. Now a deeper question beckons. Why do we have nightmares? What purpose could these distressing dreams serve? Is there any rhyme or reason to why our brains do this to us? As you stay snug under the covers, let's explore some theories and insights into why nightmares exist at all. Nightmares can feel utterly baffling. Why would our own mind create such terrifying experiences for us? It's a question that has intrigued humans for ages, and modern science still doesn't have a single definitive answer. Instead, we have a tapestry of theories from psychology, neuroscience, and evolutionary biology that try to explain the purpose, if any, of nightmares. As we discuss these ideas, we'll keep our tone gentle and curious. Think of this part as pondering the mysteries of the night by a warm campfire, swapping hypotheses and stories about why nightmares visit us. One prominent theory is that nightmares, and dreams in general, are part of our emotional processing system. Many experts believe that dreaming is a way the brain works through feelings, memories, and stresses, essentially a form of overnight therapy. From this perspective, nightmares might arise when we have unresolved fear or trauma that the brain is trying to confront or make sense of. The dream becomes a stage to replay or symbolize these emotional experiences. For example, if someone went through a traumatic event, they might have recurring nightmares that either replay the event or present similar terror. This isn't the brain trying to torture the person. It could be an attempt to integrate the trauma into memory and reduce its emotional sting over time. In fact, in healthy dreaming, as we mentioned, REM sleep can help dampen emotional intensity by re-exposing us to memories in a low noradrenaline environment. But with severe trauma, the nightmares can be very intense. It's as if the brain keeps poking at the wound but hasn't healed it yet. So one view is nightmares are an overzealous attempt at emotional processing, where the brain is grappling with fear or stress, but not quite resolving it, resulting in a dramatic bad dream. Another idea is the threat simulation theory, which gives nightmares an evolutionary purpose. This theory, proposed by researcher Antti Revonsuo and others, suggests that dreams, especially negative ones, evolved to serve as a virtual rehearsal of threatening situations. Imagine our ancient ancestors living in a world of predators and dangers. Those who could mentally practice responses to threats might have been more prepared when real danger struck. A nightmare of being chased by a lion could, in theory, help one react faster or smarter if a predator was encountered in waking life. According to this theory, nightmares are like training simulations. Your brain creates a scary scenario while you're safe in bed so that you can experience fear and learn to deal with it, all without real risk. Over millennia, this could be a beneficial trait. Even today, while we, hopefully, aren't being chased by wild beasts, our nightmares often involve fleeing or fighting scenarios. It's intriguing to think that on some level, having a nightmare of escaping a dangerous attacker might tune your instincts. If ever you face danger while awake, you might have a sharper reaction. Some research supports that nightmares tend to focus on ancestral threats, like being chased or attacked, more often than modern ones like, say, losing your smartphone, which gives a bit of credence to the evolutionary angle. However, threat simulation theory doesn't explain all nightmares. As some scientists point out, why would we need to rehearse something bizarre like your furniture coming to life? Or what about nightmares of taking an exam late? How is that an ancient threat? So, it's likely not all nightmares have an adaptive purpose. Some could be byproducts of other processes. Another theory to consider is that nightmares are an outgrowth of the brain's learning and memory consolidation tasks. During sleep, especially REM, our brain is consolidating memories, moving information from short-term storage to long-term, and integrating new info with old. In doing so, it may sometimes accidentally trigger emotional memories or fears and weave them into a narrative, resulting in a nightmare. In this view, a nightmare might be a sort of glitch or side effect of memory processing. Picture a computer defragmenting its drive overnight. Occasionally, it might throw up a strange error message, the nightmare, as it sorts through files. There's an interesting twist here. Some nightmares might actually reflect the brain trying to unlearn fear. There's speculation that when we dream of something scary in a context where we ultimately realize it was a dream, the brain might be attempting to teach us that the feared memory can be safely revisited without harm. It's a bit like exposure therapy in sleep, though clearly, when it wakes us up in terror, it hasn't done the smoothest job. A related angle involves neurotransmitters and brain chemistry. During REM, levels of stress neurotransmitters like norepinephrine drop in normal circumstances. Some researchers, like Dr. Matthew Walker and colleagues, have proposed that this drop in norepinephrine during REM creates a safe space for emotional memories to be processed without the full punch of adrenergic stress. But if someone has very high baseline stress, like PTSD patients often do with elevated norepinephrine, this dampening might not occur enough, leading to intense adrenaline-soaked nightmares that don't resolve the fear. In simpler terms, the brain is trying to work through the fear, but the physiology isn't cooperating, so the nightmare runs wild. Treatments for PTSD nightmares, interestingly, sometimes use a medication called prazosin that lowers blood pressure and norepinephrine activity, and this has been shown to reduce nightmares in many patients. That supports the idea that chemical environment in the brain influences nightmare intensity. If you reduce the adrenaline-like chemicals, the nightmares often ease, perhaps because the brain can then reprocess the trauma more calmly. Cultural and individual differences also shape theories of why nightmares occur. Some traditions and therapists interpret nightmares as messages, either from the unconscious mind or even from beyond. Freud famously saw dreams, including nightmares, as expressions of unconscious wishes or conflicts, often in symbolic disguise. From a Freudian lens, a nightmare might be a forbidden wish or fear trying to surface, which the conscious mind finds threatening, hence the fear. Jungian psychology might view nightmare figures, like monsters or demons, as manifestations of our shadow self or repressed aspects of psyche, urging integration. Those are more metaphorical interpretations rather than scientific, but they offer a perspective. Nightmares force us to confront what we might otherwise avoid in ourselves. For example, dreaming of a terrifying monster could symbolically represent a part of you, anger perhaps, or trauma, that you haven't faced in waking life. The nightmare compels you to face it, even if in a symbolic form. From a learning point of view, nightmares may have a cautionary tale function. Some researchers have mused that dreams create scenarios to test our responses. Ever notice how in some nightmares you make decisions, hide here or run there, and sometimes you fail, get caught, etc. It's as if the brain runs a drill. What if this happened? What would you do? If you fail in the dream, you get overwhelmed by the situation, you wake up. Essentially a failure state. But perhaps next time, the theory goes, you might alter your behavior. There's anecdotal evidence that people who have recurrent nightmares sometimes spontaneously start to change the dream, like confronting the attacker instead of fleeing, which can break the nightmare loop. That's part of how lucid dreaming or nightmare therapies work. More on those soon. It hints that on some level our brain can learn and adapt from nightmares. The nightmare is a teacher, albeit a scary, tough-love teacher, pushing us to develop coping skills. An evolutionary viewpoint beyond threat simulation is that nightmares might be an unfortunate trade-off of having a vivid imagination. Humans evolved a powerful ability to envision scenarios, remember vividly, and anticipate problems, skills that help us create and plan. The cost of such a rich imagination could be that sometimes it runs amok at night. Our sophisticated brains can conjure marvelous fantasies, but also horrible fears. So nightmares might not themselves be directly advantageous, but they're a side effect of a brain complex enough to dream vividly. In other words, a price we pay for creative and imaginative dreaming is the occasional nightmare. This aligns with the observation that people who have higher dream recall or more vivid dreams also tend to report more nightmares. The volume is turned up on all dreaming, good and bad. One more positive reframe: nightmares may serve as a psychic release valve. Emotions like anxiety or fear that build up during the day might need an outlet. A nightmare can provide that outlet in dramatic fashion. You wake up from a nightmare and often, after the initial fright, you might feel some relief, as if a storm has passed. Some therapists note that clients can have a big nightmare and then feel emotionally lighter, as though the dream expressed something they hadn't been able to. In this way, a nightmare could be cathartic. It's not fun while it's happening, but it releases tension. Think of how a good cry can leave you feeling relieved afterward. Similarly, an intense dream of fear might expel some of that fear from your system, at least temporarily. Notably, nightmares can sometimes spur action or insight that ends up helping a person. For instance, someone plagued by nightmare scenes might seek therapy or personal changes to address what's bothering them. There are stories of people whose recurring nightmares about, say, being trapped in a burning house prompted them to examine feelings of entrapment in their job or relationship, leading them to make healthy changes in waking life. In that way, the nightmare was like an alarm bell, screaming, "There's something in your life causing you distress." Once they address the issue, the nightmare often goes away. So perhaps one purpose of nightmares is to draw attention to issues we need to resolve. It's an uncomfortable way for our mind to signal us, but it can be effective. In scientific honesty, we must say the question, why do we have nightmares, is still not fully answered. It may not have one neat answer. The consensus so far, nightmares seem tied to emotional and psychological factors. They are not random nonsense, yet they also aren't neatly purposeful in all cases. Stress, fear, trauma, and even our personality and genetic makeup all influence nightmare frequency, and different theories can all carry some truth. Perhaps nightmares both helped our ancestors rehearse threats and help individuals process emotions. These functions aren't mutually exclusive. The brain is complex and can multitask. One alluring idea is that nightmares are the flip side of human creativity and imagination. The same mind that dreams up beautiful, whimsical fantasies can also produce nightmarish scenes. The creative engine doesn't have a moral filter. It spits out whatever imagery and storylines our experiences and emotions might evoke. Nightmares may be the cost of dreaming at all. If we want the ability to simulate life in our heads, which has many benefits, we have to accept that sometimes those simulations will be scary or unpleasant. It's a package deal with consciousness. As we warm ourselves by the fire of these theories, you might reflect on your own nightmares and consider, did any of them come during times of high stress or after a scary incident? Did any teach you something or make you aware of a fear you needed to face? If so, perhaps your nightmares had a silver lining of meaning or utility. If not, remember that sometimes a nightmare is just a glitch, an overactive imagination, or an anxious brain having a hiccup in the night. Either way, they are an intrinsic part of the landscape of sleep. Our journey continues next into more concrete territory. How our waking experiences, especially stress, trauma, and anxiety, feed into nightmares, and how nightmares in turn affect our waking life. We've touched on that, but let's delve a bit more, walking gently between the daytime and the dream time to see how one influences the other. We have wandered through the shadows and light of the world of nightmares, and now we come to a place of rest. Here, at the end of our journey, take a deep, slow breath. Feel the weight of your body sinking gently into your bed. The night around you is quiet and calm. Any distant worries or lingering fears from our discussions can be exhaled away now. You have faced them in thought and you are safe. Think of all we've discovered. Nightmares are but dreams, intense and emotional, yes, but ultimately stories of the mind. They can startle us, but they cannot reach beyond the veil of sleep to harm us. Like a movie that plays in the theatre of our mind, they end, and we open our eyes to the real world, where we are intact and okay. Recall that you are the dreamer, not the dream. The power lies with you. Even when a nightmare sweeps you up in its drama, it is your brain that can also dispel it. As you lie here, feel how secure and cozy you are. Perhaps the air has a slight chill of night, but you are wrapped in warmth. Perhaps it's utterly still, or you hear the soft whir of a fan, or the gentle patter of rain on the window. Whatever the soundscape, let it lull you. If a stray thought of something scary drifts by, imagine it as a dark cloud passing the moon. You acknowledge it and watch it float on. The moonlight, the light of your awareness, remains serene and silver, untroubled by temporary clouds. You might picture, if you like, a friendly scene to carry you into sleep. Maybe a tranquil garden at midnight, with moonbeams on dewy grass and crickets singing a lullaby. In this garden of the mind, any figures that once seemed frightening are transformed. See how a once menacing shadow in the trees might reveal itself to be just a gentle deer stepping into the clearing. The monster, perhaps, was only a twisted old oak, now quietly watching over you like a guardian. Everything strange can become familiar under a kindly gaze. Remind yourself that dreams, even nightmares, are transient. They come and go, whereas your inner calm can remain. You have the tools to calm yourself if a nightmare arises, but maybe you won't even need them tonight. Maybe tonight your mind will sail smooth and sweet on kinder currents. And if not, if a rogue wave of a dream comes, you'll ride it and safely reach the morning's shore, as you always have. Morning always comes. Darkness always gives way to dawn, both in the sky and in our souls. As you drift off, consider whispering a gentle intention to yourself. Tonight, I welcome peaceful dreams. But if a nightmare comes, I will remember I am dreaming, and I will not be afraid. I will float above it until it passes. Even if you don't become lucid, this intention sets a tone of confidence. You are essentially telling your mind that you trust yourself. Now, let it all go. You don't need to actively think about nightmares or anything at all. You can let my words fade from an active focus to just a soft background murmur until even that fades into silence. Feel the heaviness in your limbs, a pleasant, sinking heaviness as you relax completely. Your breathing is slow and steady. Each breath out carries you a step deeper into the valley of sleep. But this valley is safe and gentle. If you like, you can imagine a protective light around you as you sleep. Perhaps a warm glowing bubble, or the arms of a loving presence. Whatever makes you feel most secure. Know that many people around the world at this very moment are also sleeping and dreaming, sharing in the universal human experience of the night. You are not alone. You are part of the great human story, and nightmares are just a few pages in the vast book of that story. Sometimes dark pages, but never the whole book. And in stories, dark chapters often precede uplifting resolutions. The hero, which is you in your own life, emerges wiser and stronger. The night is deep now. The science, the theories, the tales we explored, they can all rest in your memory, to be recalled only if useful. There's nothing more you need to do or learn right now. All that's left is to sleep, to heal, to renew. Your mind will take care of itself through the cycles of sleep. You might dream, perhaps peacefully, perhaps whimsically. If a stray nightmare tries to intrude, maybe you'll remember a tip from our journey and gently steer it away, or simply float above until you wake. Either way, you're going to be all right. Feel gratitude for your curious mind that came on this journey with me. Even when it conjures nightmares, that mind is a wondrous thing, capable of imagination and depth. Feel gratitude for the comfort of your bed, the rhythm of your breath, the gift of another night's rest. When the morning light comes for you, you might not recall any dreams, or you might recall one and think, interesting. Either way, you'll awaken to a new day, leaving the night's shadows behind, just as countless nights before. For now, though, the world of wakefulness is slipping away. Let it go. Sink into the quiet night, wrapped in knowledge, understanding, and comfort. You have done enough for today. There is nothing to fear in this moment. Sleep is here to carry you to a place of deep rest and gentle dreams. Let it carry you now, floating softly, drifting down. I wish you a serene night and sweet dreams. Sleep well. You are safe. You are at peace. Good night.